We're following a case of a missing 14-year-old girl. She was an athlete, she was a sister, she was a friend. The search for this young teenager ended in a way no one wanted. She was found dead behind her home in Illinois, and her alleged killer has a shocking connection to her, as well as a criminal history that shows this is not his first time in trouble with the law related to young people. We're on the case presented by Law&Crime. I'm Chris Stewart. Let's talk about this incredibly disturbing case that we're following right now out of Illinois. And the big question is, how did Kylie Toberman, a young, bright girl with so much to give in this world, end up in a living situation that would allegedly lead to her murder? There's a lot to unpack here in this story and how this 14-year-old lost her life. And before we get into what we know about her alleged killer and his shocking criminal history that is making a lot of people upset, it includes a past of criminal sexual abuse of a child between the ages of 16 and 9. Again, there's a lot to unpack here, but I want to talk about how this story began. This is the victim. Her name is Kylie Toberman. She lived in Vandalia, Illinois. That's in the southern part of that state, just about an hour away from St. Louis, a small town. We're talking about 7,500 people. Now, Toberman, she was a girl who friends are now remembering as someone who was just a great friend. Her grandmother told KMOV TV, quote, "Kylie was very beautiful, very energetic, very happy all the time. I have already missed her so much." Those are sentiments being echoed from so many people as this story has shape over the last several days. Now, Toberman, when you look at pictures of her, she may seem like just a sweet teenage girl, but don't let that smile fool you because she was tough. In fact, she was on the high school wrestling team. People remembering her as a dedicated member of the team. You certainly have to be tough to play that sport. Now, we are starting to learn that Toberman's home life, though, that was not so typical, and there are definitely some red flags that people are pointing to right now, and you'll see why as we get into more details about this story. KMOV in St. Louis is reporting that family members say that the Illinois Department of Children and Family Services, they were called several times to where Toberman was living this year. She was living with two younger sisters and an adopted mom in an RV on a street called West Gallatin in Vandalia, the small town in southern Illinois. Now, in the wake of Kylie's murder, her biological mom posted on Facebook, it said in part, quote, "I was young and dumb. I thought I could trust somebody, and now my baby is an angel. I will not shut up or stop till my child gets justice." Now, it appears that there were custody issues involving Toberman. Her mom said that Kylie's adoptive mom would not let her see her daughter. Now, here is what we know about what happened to Kylie. It was on Friday, November 14th, less than a week ago at 6 o'clock in the morning, police in southern Illinois put out an alert that Kylie was missing. Later that day, the worst case scenario became a reality. The body of 14-year-old Kylie Toberman was found in a tote behind the RV that she lived in. Now, the details are not easy to talk about. I'm going to warn you. The graphic details of this girl's alleged murder. Police say that Toberman was strangled to death using jumper cables. Police say she was sexually assaulted. Now, this is a picture that law enforcement put out as they searched for the man they said was responsible. His name is Albert B. Rivera Jr. Now, the search for Rivera did not last long. He was captured hours later on Friday after Kylie's body was found behind the RV. And this is his mugshot after his arrest. He's already made his first court appearance. I'm going to talk about that in just a moment. I want to talk about something important, and that is debt. It is brutal. It can leave you feeling stuck. But today's sponsor, PDS Debt, helps people fight back, whether it's credit cards, personal loans, or medical bills. PDS Debt has customized options to help you pay off debt faster, no minimum credit score required. They're A+ rated by the Better Business Bureau, and we all know that credit card debt, it's a big problem. You might know someone who is struggling with it, looking for a way out. It's your money, it's your future. Don't let the system decide for you. You are 30 seconds away from being debt-free. Get your free assessment and find the best option for you right now at pdsdebt.com/OTC. That is pdsdebt.com/OTC, pdsdebt.com/OTC. According to police, Kylie was allegedly killed the day before her body was found. Now, who was this person? Who would kill a girl with such a promising future? Well, allegedly, it was the man who legally was her caretaker. That is according to the law enforcement documents that we have from police in Southern Illinois. He was her caretaker. Now, in the words of law enforcement, he was in a, quote, position of trust or supervision of Kylie Toberman, not to mention the two other sisters that she had in that home. KSDK is reporting that Rivera has a lengthy criminal history. In the year 2000, he was charged with criminal sexual abuse of a child between the ages of 9 and 16. And here he is, 25 years later, now charged with the murder of a girl who was just 14 years old. KSDK reports that prosecutors dropped that criminal sexual abuse charge, though, as well as a burglary charge back in 2000 in exchange for Rivera to plead guilty in a separate case to felony aggravated battery. He received 30 months probation in that case. Then in 2008, he was in trouble with the law again. He was sentenced to 24 months probation for possessing a stolen vehicle. So this is someone who has been arrested in the past, who has faced serious allegations in the past. But when you see that he got probation in two different instances, it makes you believe, what were prosecutors thinking? Now, for what he allegedly did to Kylie Toberman, Rivera is now facing a charge of first-degree murder, aggravated criminal sexual assault, and concealing a homicidal death. Cameras weren't allowed in the courtroom for his first court appearance in Illinois. KSDK described the atmosphere, though, as, quote, heavy, not just with grief, but palpable anger, especially after learning Rivera had a prior lengthy criminal record involving abuse charges with minors, end quote. Now, Toberman lived with Rivera, as well as her adoptive mom and her sisters in that RV, as her biological mom went through medical treatment. That is according to the TV station. Toberman's high school is holding a vigil for her on Wednesday night. Many people shattered, including her own family members, that her life was taken so soon. The vigil, it's being called Remembering Kylie. Her light shines on through us. Join us now to talk a little bit more about this really difficult case out of Illinois is Matt Mangino, criminal defense attorney and former prosecutor. Thank you for being with us on Law and Crime as we're kind of unpacking everything in the death of Kylie Toberman. The suspect, Arnold Rivera, his background, and I know we're going to talk about this plea deal that happened back in 2000, but just what's your initial impressions of him and his background and how it factors into what he's accused of in this case?
Well, certainly, criminal history is always something that's taken into consideration, whether it's at time of sentencing or even when, evaluating evidence in a new case. And it can be also used as modus operandi. Has this person been involved in conduct like this before? Now, as I understand, at some point he was charged with sexual abuse of a child under the age of 16, but ultimately that case was dismissed, as I understand, in exchange for a guilty plea on other offenses. And that's not uncommon, that a case would be negotiated in terms of the charges as well as the potential penalty that a defendant could face. But in this case, this is a guy, because of his history, who probably shouldn't be the caretaker of a young woman, a 14-year-old child who, as I understand the news accounts, was kind of in his care while his mother was recuperating or receiving some medical treatment.
Yeah, and it's so the line here from this is a Fox News report. Rivera has a criminal history dating back to 2000. That year, prosecutors dismissed charges of criminal sexual abuse involving a child between the ages of 9 and 16, as well as burglary, and it was in exchange for a guilty plea to felony aggravated battery. When a prosecutor makes a decision to have a situation like this, where he's he's facing very serious charges in this criminal sexual abuse case, but then they wanted him on this felony aggravated battery, and this was 25 years ago. How often is that in a prosecutor's mind that something someday could come back to bite them where, it's been, again, 25 years since he was accused in facing these charges, that now he's accused of a horrific crime of a girl who's 14 years old.
Well, Chris, there are a lot of factors that go into plea negotiations. It wasn't as though um, he didn't plead guilty to a serious offense back then. I mean, that was, as I understand it, a felony aggravated battery. He was charged with a sex crime at one point, and that was negotiated away. But there's a lot of factors to go into that. I mean, you may have at that point a reluctant witness, a child witness who doesn't, want to testify, or who is afraid to testify, or doesn't want to, relive the trauma of that, and maybe her family doesn't want her to do that as well. So prosecutors look for another option in terms of that plea, so that this person doesn't just walk away, but they do get some accountability for their conduct.
Yeah, because I think I think one thing I've noticed when we cover stories is you have the belief that for every person who's found guilty that you got to hammer him, in terms of how the public views it. And he didn't receive prison time, but I guess in the reality, 30 months probation, because on the outside, and it's certainly 2020 hindsight here with what he's accused of, you sit there and you say, how did this guy not spend a minute in prison when you're at one point accused with sexual abuse of a child between the ages of 16 and 9 back in the year 2000? In circles of prosecutors, I mean, and I know a lot will depend on, to your point, the witnesses and everything. I mean, 30 months probation, how is that viewed from prosecutors about how serious of a punishment that can be?
Again, there's factors that need to be considered. At this point, Rivera was a teenager himself. Okay, so that's a factor that I think that the court's going to take into consideration. And number two, maybe part of this probationary sentence, and again, I'm just speculating, may have involved some sort of treatment, some sort of programming on the street to help him deal with any issues that he may have. It also gives the state an opportunity to supervise him for 2.5 years. So that supervision could be intensive, where he has to report regularly and be monitored for drugs and alcohol and things like that. But it also, permits the probation authorities in Illinois to monitor him, to make sure that he's not doing anything that could victimize other people. So there's always some sort of strategy involved in a sentence. And here I think you're looking at someone who was a teen himself, someone who was going to be supervised over a period of time. We don't know the age of the victim, and this by no means is meant to minimize the seriousness of this offense. But I think that there is normally some sort of strategy on behalf of the prosecution, the probation officials, in the court in a situation like that.
Now that he is facing first-degree murder and also facing a sexual assault charge in connection to the death of Kylie Toberman, could that history, how much of that history could come into play with whether he is, whether it's a plea deal negotiation or if he tries to take this to trial?
Well, it would depend. Typically crimes that involve, falsehood or deceit can be used against a defendant for purposes of attacking their credibility. Those types of crimes are called crimes of crimen falsi, where you show that this person had a tendency to be dishonest in the past, and you could tell a jury, hey, disregard everything this guy said because of that. Now, these don't appear to be crimen falsi crimes, so you'd have to show that there's some sort of modus operandi. There's some sort of similarity between what was alleged in the past, because prior bad acts don't necessarily have to be convictions. They can be used, based on the individual state's rules of evidence. Typically, those are 404B evidence that deals with prior bad acts. That would be, as I see it, just at first blush, the only way that his prior conduct could come into his new trial.
And looking at this case, and sadly, they find the body of this 14-year-old girl after she had gone missing. They believe that she was killed the night before. Her body found reportedly in a tote bag behind the RV that she was living in. It hasn't been disclosed yet specifically how authorities got to the point where they believe that Arnold Rivera was the person who did it. For prosecutors and investigators, he's now in custody. He's going to be in jail awaiting trial. What happens now as you build this case going forward against this guy?
Well, I'm sure there's been forensic testing that's being done. I'm sure that for this terrible crime, autopsy, there's going to be different types of sampling for semen and other types of DNA that might be present. As I understand, again from news reports, that she was strangled with the jumper cables. So all these items that were found, whether it was in his car where the sexual assault occurred, there's going to be a lot of testing done to make a connection between him and the victim in this case. And you're also going to dig deep into Rivera and what his conduct has been, what he was doing immediately prior to this. Was there ongoing abuse between with Rivera on this young woman, on Kylie? And the other thing that I think is going to be looked at is, as I understand, Rivera is Donna Toberman's son, who was the adoptive mother of Kylie. And, did she know about his history of criminal activity? Did she know that he had been accused of a sexual assault, which I would assume she would know if he was a teen at the time? And why would she leave this child in his care knowing of that circumstance? And again, was this ongoing abuse? Donna Toberman may have some problems as well because of her conduct in this situation.
Right, because I think of the case being built and the medical examiner, the coroner, whoever it may be, who would go on the stand and talk about the injuries and then whatever potential connection they would have to Arnold Rivera. And there are reports out there that family members have said they tried to warn DCFS in Illinois that there were issues going on this year inside that home. For prosecutors, when you're making a decision of who might be a witness, if this would actually go to trial, beyond the medical examiner, maybe even beyond the DCFS representative who can say, these are the calls that we received for this home, these are the conversations we had, who else are you looking to, and what goes into the decision to say, okay, this is the person that I want to have on the stand?
Well, you're going to look to people who were close to both Kylie and to Rivera. Did he say anything about her? Did she reveal anything to her friends and other members of her wrestling team and people at school? And, if Protective Services was involved in this case in some way, or had been tipped off that there may be some problems, did they follow through on that investigation? Who did they talk to? What were the allegations made? I mean, it would be terrible if we know that there were some suggestion to Protective Services that she was being abused and that, wasn't adequately looked into. That would be a huge failure that put Kylie in this very vulnerable position.
Yeah, and she had two sisters inside, living at that RV location as well. In that town. There's always the side that I think about, okay, the defense. Because when you look at from the outside, Arnold Rivera, his criminal history, what police have accused him of, it seems like the prosecution would have a very strong case. How does a criminal defense attorney, knowing that you are walking in, not to mention this is a small town, there's not a lot of stuff that happens here on this scale from a public attention standpoint, so people likely will know about this if you would even go this far to a trial. How does a criminal defense attorney approach this case knowing so much is stacked against you?
Well, the first thing that I would want to know as a defense attorney would be, did Rivera make any statements? Was he talked to by the police? Was he Mirandized? Did he make any statements against his interest when he didn't have counsel present? Those would be the first places that I would look. Did he make any statements to people other than the authorities? And, the basic premise of any representation is to protect a defendant's individual rights. Has there been something done in this case which would violate Rivera's constitutional rights? They found items, because we know that it's, at least in the news reports, that there were jumper cables, that this sexual assault happened in a car, her body was hidden in a tote bag in an RV. Did the police get search warrants to go into the RV? Did they get search warrants or consent to go into the vehicle? Where did they go to find these jumper cables? All these different questions have to be answered, and you have to make sure that the police, the Illinois State Police, as I understand, did not violate Rivera's constitutional rights during this investigation.
I know one question I'll often hear from people when they just ask about criminal defense. I'm not a lawyer, you are, so you're a good person to ask about this, is, if in any case, and I'm not going to specifically say this one because I don't know the conversations that Rivera's had with his representation and what that looks like, but if you have a client that is very open and honest about what they're accused of and almost admitting in that conversation with the attorney, how do those conversations shape what the defense looks like if they want to go to trial?
Well, if a defendant, tells his or her lawyer that they committed this offense, then, the scope of what can be done on behalf of that defendant is somewhat restricted, because an attorney has an ethical obligation to make sure that there is no misrepresentations made in court about the situation. So if a defendant says, hey, I did this, but you know what, I'm going to take the witness stand and I'm going to say I didn't because I have this friend who's going to say I was with them that night, a lawyer can't proceed like that. That lawyer who knows that would be a deception, that would be a lie told to the court under oath, that lawyer would have to withdraw from that representation. You can't continue, once you know something, to present to the court something that's factually inaccurate. So a lot of times you'll hear a defense attorney say, well, I don't want to know if my client did this or not. I'm here to make sure that his constitutional rights are protected and that there's been no miscarriage of justice. And, if he says he wasn't there and he's told me from the beginning he wasn't there, then I can go forward with this defense. If he tells me something different and expects me to misrepresent that to the court, I can't do that.
Yeah, and we'll see what Arnold Rivera's defense looks like, certainly with the criminal history that's been laid out in reports and what he's accused of. Just an incredibly disturbing case out of Illinois. Matt Mangino, criminal defense attorney, former prosecutor. It's always great to have you on Law and Crime. Thanks for being with us.
Thank you, Chris.
That will do it for On the Case, presented by Law and Crime. Subscribe to us on YouTube and Spotify. I'm Chris Stewart. We'll see you next time.